Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Bett Middle East keynote panel session, in which we're going to be discussing world-class learning in the Middle East, teachers, technology, and policy. Thank you all for turning up so promptly. We're very lucky to have an expert panel of very senior educationalists from across the region, who I'll introduce in just a moment. My name is Richard Thompson. I'm the editor of MEAD, which is the Middle East Economic Digest. I will be moderating this panel session. The session will start with a 20-minute presentation and will be followed by a discussion with the group. And please, I invite you all to take part in the discussion. It's one of these rare opportunities when we can all be together and network and discuss things that are better done face-to-face than by email. So please take advantage of this opportunity. As I said, we're very privileged and lucky to have with us a panel of some of the region's leading educationalists, and I'd like to introduce them to you now. I'm joined on stage by first Professor Ralph Tabora of GEMS Education, who is sitting nearest me. Next to him is Estelle Burton. She is the Principal Advisor in IT at the UK's Confederation of British Teachers, and she works here in Abu Dhabi. Next to Estelle is Dr. Hala Tawil, who is the President of the University of Middle East Project. Next to Hala is Azza El Shinawi, who is the Education Leader at Microsoft Gulf. And in the seat at the end, we have Haif Banayan, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Jordan Education Initiative. Please put your hands together to welcome our panelists. Thank you very much. From a MEAD perspective, education is taking on a far more significant position in the Middle East economy and in the Middle East business sector than it's ever had previously. It's a significant driver of policy in the region, and it's also emerging as a significant business sector in the region. A top priority for governments in the Middle East is meeting the needs of a rapidly growing population. And I'm sure we've all heard about this and read about this many times. But we have something like 2/3 of the region's population under the age of 25, all of whom need to be equipped with the tools and skills needed to compete in the global workplace. In parallel to that, the region's governments for many years have been seeking ways to diversify their economies, to wean them off their dependence on oil as the major driver of economic activity. And a key element of that is developing a knowledge-based economy in the region. The education sector is absolutely fundamental to the delivery of those goals. Many of those drivers have been around for several decades, and for most governments in the region, these are not new issues. However, they're becoming increasingly more pressing. And despite huge levels of investment in infrastructure over many years, I think it's probably fair to say the performance of the certainly state education sector has been patchy over the past few years. MEAD magazine, the Middle East Economic Digest, in the summer conducted a business survey of the business perspective on the product of the state education sector in the Gulf. And as Ralph will say in his presentation later, whilst there are many, many strengths that the Middle East should seek to retain within its education sector, and while business felt that local students performed well on numeracy, on Arabic literacy, and on appearance, there were also weaknesses which are fairly important. Time management was marked down by business as a weakness, creative thinking, and problem solving. I think these issues will probably recur through the many panel sessions that we have over the next 2 days. Secondary education in particular was seen as an area in need of development in comparison to primary and tertiary education. And perhaps the biggest metric or the most indicative measure of all is the fact that large numbers of wealthy locals still choose to go abroad for their education at various stages. But things are changing. Across the region, governments are embarked on reforming the education sector, and Abu Dhabi in particular is at the forefront of this reform programme. The support of the Abu Dhabi Education Council for this event and the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan shows Abu Dhabi's commitment to this reform programme. And it's creating opportunities and challenges for both the private sector and the government sector. There are opportunities for private schools operators, for example, for suppliers to the education sector. We're seeing an increasing number of internationally recognised education brands opening up campuses in the region. Governments are pumping more investment into education than ever before. This is creating opportunities. It's also creating challenges for the sector. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll look at these opportunities and challenges. So before we move on with our first speaker, could I invite you all please to turn off your mobile phones or put them on silent if you haven't done so already. And I will invite Ralph Tabora to take the podium. Ralph is the Chief Executive Officer of GEMS Education. Please welcome him.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see you here. Thank you, Richard, for the introduction. Let me get on with some words which are about world-class learning in this region. For me, it's very exciting to have both the Bett and the BFE events in the UAE this week. I'm not sure whether I should admit this, but I attended and provided keynote presentations at the first Bett events ever, which were in London in the early 1980s. And to show you just how long ago that was, microcomputers had just been invented, and we were speaking and arguing about the revolution that they would herald in schools. Today, I think we're in the early days of what I hope and expect will be as exciting an era for Bett in the Middle East. The Middle East, of course, isn't at all like the West. Bett will be a different proposition in this area, but I hope it works just as well as a meeting place for governments, for teachers and school leaders, for manufacturers and education suppliers. We can learn a lot from each other just by meeting and talking, finding common cause, finding ways to work together, and finding ways to improve schools. Now, my presentation is designed to celebrate some of the differences that characterize schools in the Middle East. And celebrate's the right word because there's much here to learn, especially if you come from the West, and there's much to admire. You might think that world-class is an overworked phrase. You might also think that world-class doesn't immediately ring true as a phrase, a description of education in a region which has done badly on the international comparisons of student performance that are run by people like PISA and TIMSS. But there are real lessons, I believe, to be taken from this region in terms of schools, and I want to pick out my strong features. I'm going to pick out four abiding strengths, if you like, in order to set off our discussions today. I've always believed that we can only get better if we start by recognizing what we're doing well. Now, my first strength is taking up something in the curriculum area. I had to come to this part of the world to discover what's the first building block in any curriculum. It's not, as some people think, those valuable bodies of knowledge that sit within what we define as subjects. It's not the content of science, mathematics, humanities, and the arts, although those are extremely important. Nor is the first building block values, although I'd be one of the first to assert the importance of schools developing a character in a young person. And it's not even learning to learn, which is currently, if you like, the fashion in the West. No, this region teaches you that the first thing a curriculum must do is to help children and young people discover and understand their identity. That's the first building block of a curriculum. And this has to start from community, parents, family, nation, and faith. That is, a curriculum has to start from what's local and those elements that are in our roots. Only by understanding our community's stories, histories, beliefs, customs, insights, mysteries, and anxieties can you properly begin life's personal journey. Identity is extremely important here to the nations and peoples of the Gulf. If you try to school students in the homogenized world of an international identity and values without opening them first to their cultural origins, you'll be taking children away from their parents. And that won't be permitted, nor should it be. It is fine, indeed it's good, to add an international identity as well, to steep students in the diversity of the world and an understanding of and a respect for other cultures. But I've learned here that you have to start from the family and the community identity, bottom up if you wish, rather than from the top-down international homogeneity. And make no mistake, identity is just as important to all the region's visitors, if you like, the expatriate workers who only bring their families if they perceive they don't have to risk their family's upbringing. A big factor in the risk assessment of people who come here with their children is, do their children have access to an education that keeps them in touch with their home, their origins, their culture, and their identity. What's the consequence of putting identity at the heart of the curriculum? How do you do that? The answer must be for identity to be ever present in the curriculum, year in, year out, week in, week out. It must be strong in the early years where young children start to ask the question, who am I? It must be strong in history lessons, in cultural studies, in the languages taught. It must be strong in the assemblies, and it must be strong where whole school projects help to define a school's character. And this is why powerful people in the UAE and other countries in the Gulf have been right to speak out about the importance of Arabic and the importance of Islamic studies for their children. And incidentally, this is also why, going forward, one of our first and pressing concerns as we look ahead should be for strategies that will strengthen teaching in these areas. The curriculum and pedagogy of these subjects could and should be much stronger. This is even more important, in my mind, than performance in the international tests, which by their design must promote an approach to education that's all but culture-free. And incidentally, I find it quite one of the ironies, if you like, of our time that Web 2.0 has been lauded as a leap into recognizing, indeed celebrating identity, yet actually when I go on the web, it seems to me the web's still resolutely more about a cultural homogeneity than it is about the richness of different cultures. There's a long way to go there as well. The second strength I want to pick up is, moving on from curriculum, is in the area of family. Compared with the West, the family unit here is much more stable. It takes the lead in passing on culture and beliefs, and it serves as a stronger reference point throughout most people's lives. The West should be envious of this advantage. Again, the strength in family, is located within the national communities of the Gulf and within most of the expatriate communities as well, especially those that come from India and from further east. Why is this such a strength? Well, it's always been the case, despite all protestations, that the school exists to help the family raise and educate the child. The school can't usurp that role from parents. Whatever is required, or whenever the school tries to usurp that role, it almost always fails. In this region, the stronger family gives children and young people a much firmer foundation for their education, with one proviso. The family has to demonstrate to its children that it values education, and through the way the family behaves, speaks together, spends time together, the family has to demonstrate that it's dedicated to the ambition and education of its children. I'm sometimes asked whether I see the countries of the Gulf and the Middle East sentenced to a future in which they constantly play catch-up with the rest of the world, trying to emulate others' school systems, and the performance, maybe people will point to the UK or the USA. Do we have to do that, people say, or is there a future in which locally we can leapfrog these countries and lift towards the standards that are set by Finland, Singapore, Korea, and Japan? I believe it will be enormously difficult to leapfrog. But if we're going to do it, the one way we could would be by seizing the advantage that strong family structures give us. After all, research is unequivocal that parental engagement in your children's learning is one of the major contributors to student performance. If we can harness here the strength of the family, if we can show families how to speak to their children about education, how to engage them in conversations which stimulate the learning day to day, how to work in support of the school, I believe we can make much stronger progress than other countries. We would need to show schools how to work with parents as well, and it isn't a case of just making parents' evenings go better. We must seek a far deeper engagement that changes parental behaviours outside the school. And one of the GEMS programs that I'm most proud of is the parental engagement one, simply because we're taking the starting point, the desire to show parents how to support their children's learning better. That issue of getting parents involved in their children's learning more actively, working with the school, I believe will be a cornerstone of 21st century schooling. And we can invent that approach better here than anywhere else in the world. The third strength I want to point to is emerging rather than established. The strong progress, I'm talking about reform. And I'll be briefer here for the sake of time. I find the governments of this region very open to school reform. At a personal level, coming in from my experience in the UK, people have been much more open than I expected. And there are many reformers here now in positions of power who have gained deep insights into what works and what does not. I'd characterize where we are now as at the end of an age of initiatives. We're perhaps entering an age of strategy or an age of systemic reform. I'm borrowing this observation to some extent from colleagues at McKinsey because it captures for me where people are. The difference that McKinsey are pointing us to is between an age of initiatives where reformers hope to stimulate change with a well-directed program or two, to one where reformers are now recognizing the need to attack education inertia on many fronts, in leadership, in teacher quality, in the home, in curriculum change, etc. Now, unlike some, I wouldn't say that we gained little from the age of initiatives. From charter school programs in Qatar, to inspection models in Dubai, to public-private partnerships here in Abu Dhabi, there have been some great lessons learned, particularly about, well, one, how difficult it is to graft one idea from the West, or indeed from the East, onto local systems. There's no silver bullets. Two, we've learned about the importance of focusing on improving outcomes. It's actually changes in behaviour and outcomes that we're after. And three, we've learned about the centrality of teaching quality and of accountable school leadership, and an accountable school leadership that takes responsibility for its results. All reforms need these simple issues in their sights. I would only make one simple plea as we enter the age of strategies, or if you like, systemic reforms. Keep it simple, respect what's been done, hit the two most important things hard, that is teaching quality and leadership, and don't over-engineer the systems. We've got plenty of experience in the West of too much over-engineering. Of course, I'd also say invest in parents, but I've made that argument already. The fourth and last strength here in this region is the private sector. Around the world, in the so-called advanced countries, the developed economies, the private school sector has always been something of a junior partner. Traditionally, government investment has led the way, and private school solutions have only served between, well, it can be 1% and 15% of the market. Traditionally, the private school offer in these countries has tended to be quite conservative, quite secluded, targeted often at the wealthy, and highly fragmented. each school with its own family, its charity or small business mission. That's not true in the Middle East. Dubai provides the clearest example, but all around the region, private schools here have been dynamic, they've been distinctive, and they've been diverse. Here, in India as well, and in Africa, private providers are showing that they can provide solutions for all communities, even those in the lowest price brackets. There are schools that are delivering, just in the UAE, the English national curriculum for less than a fifth of the price of a state place at home in the UK, yet with results that are more than 20 percentage points better than the English norms. Just stop and think about how challenging that fact is. There are schools here that stand out as schools of the future, with facilities and characteristics that are astounding, and there are school providers, I'd include GEMS in that number, who've proved that they can reproduce quality time and time again across many types of schools, something which has rarely been seen elsewhere, even in private sector around the world. Yet, at a time when, globally, governments are finding trouble amassing the investment for a further push in school reform, the Middle East can call now upon a buoyant body of private sector capability and investment to stimulate growth and further improvement. All we have to do together in the region is to learn how to embrace the private sector, to share problems with it, to forge partnerships which tackle the challenges, and adjust to the pace that the private investors want to set. That is a fast pace. If we do all these things, we will be the source of a new model of education that I believe will show the way forward to the rest of the world. Now, just in conclusion, I know there are many governments and many reformers here in the region who are frustrated by progress, who are urgent in their wish to drive up student performance. They're eager to create a stronger culture of schooling and higher education and to establish strong foundations for a modern knowledge economy. I don't want for a moment to diminish their appetite or to interrupt their urgency. We need both of them. But what I do want to say is that there's much here that's world-class in the region, much more than people speak about. There's much more than most outsiders expect and sometimes respect. There's plenty here to build on. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you very much, Ralph Tabora, the Chief Executive Officer of GEMS Education. We have about 20 minutes or 25 minutes for discussion on some of these themes. I wondered if I put a couple of questions to each of you on the panel, if you could introduce yourselves briefly before answering the question, just to let people in the audience know what you do and why you are here speaking to them. Haif Banayan, Ralph talked there about the phrase world-class education and that it's sometimes a bit overused. I'm interested to know, how would you define world-class in a K-12 environment, and how is it possible to come up with such a definition?
Thank you, Richard. My name is Haif Banayan. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Jordan Education Initiative, which is one of the organizations of Her Majesty Queen Rani Al Abdullah, working in Jordan with the public schools to improve schools through public-private partnership, with a particular focus to integrate technology in education. To address your question, perhaps the single most value that most education systems agree about is creating the learning environment for students to personalize and lead the learning, and maybe to become global citizens. However, to come up with that, it varies from one country to the other. There are a lot of differences. Our personal experiences is that there are some critical if we're talking on a nationwide level, there are some critical success factors I think that they are needed, particularly in our region. Starting with a very strong leadership, countrywide leadership, it's very much needed. Open, collaborative government who's willing to work with all stakeholders that are into education. shared responsibility. Education is not only a responsibility of the school or of the government, it is actually a shared responsibility, and therefore the private sector focus is very much needed, and this is one of the things that we have done. We have actually strived on the growth of the private sector in Jordan to bring them in to work with public schools in Jordan. On a school level, of course, there are critical factors that play into role. First of all, again, we go back to leadership, visionary principals who are capable of creating this dynamic learning environment, very strong teachers, professional teachers, and of course, technology plays a major role, because if we're talking about exposed students, you need technology. Internet is the single most window for students to gain exposure and to gain information, and therefore technology infrastructure is very important to be there. In my belief, it has to be there in a very natural and invisible way. It's not about the technology; it's about how that technology is used in education. How would you access the internet? How would you use this technology in a way that our students get more exposure and more knowledge?
Perhaps I could pass the question on to Azza El-Shinawi from Microsoft. World-class education and the role of technology, accessibility, its role in the classroom. What do you think?
Well, there is no dispute now that technology in education is a must-have. If you look at the sectors that are going to lead world growth in the immediate and the near future, and you look at the jobs that are going to support this kind of growth, and you look at the ICT intensity of these jobs, whether we're talking about the financial sector, pharmaceutical sector, defense, it's all ICT intensive kind of skills. And this is the kind of skills that you have to expose your students from a very early stage, so that by the time they eventually enter the labor market, passing through university years, they are well competent in this kind of skills, that they not only join the labor market with the intention of just joining, but with the intention and ability to innovate and add new value to whatever jobs they are entering.
In your position as education lead at Microsoft Gulf, how do you see the performance across the region of what you're saying, innovation in the classroom?
Well, it's very obvious that the majority of governments in this region are taking the whole concept of reform in education very, very seriously, and the whole initiative of ICT in education as equally seriously. But this is a kind of investment in general, investment in the returns of investment in education is some sort of a long-term kind of, your returns, you see it not in the immediate future, but you can take some proxies on the extent to which there are returns in terms of investment in education reform, injecting the right level of ICT in education again, and depending on the degree to which the system can absorb ICT in education. And if I give an example to the country that's currently hosting this event, if you look at the competitiveness indicators of the UAE, specifically on the pillar of higher education and training, for each single indicator within this index, they have advanced significantly thanks to taking reforms in education very seriously. If you also look at the pillar of innovation, and again, this is a proxy, innovation is a proxy on the extent which you invest in reform in education. Again, you see significant advancement. So I think the region is moving in the right direction. The pace is the question.
Do you feel that companies such as your own, Microsoft, can play a bigger role in helping to advance the use of IT in the classroom, or has it all got to come from the government side and the educationalists?
As I told you, governments are very serious about endorsing this initiative in education. However, education is the business of the educators. IT is, again, is a competency. And this is where the role of companies like Microsoft and other companies, where they come and support policymakers in adoption, in teacher training, in student training. So this will all accelerate the right kind of exposure of ICT in education.
Thank you. If I could move on, Dr. Hala, before you answer this question, if you could introduce yourself, but how do you feel that the Middle East education sector compares to other parts of the world, both in terms of the existing product at the moment and in the role of IT in the classroom?
Thank you. My name is Hala Tawil. I'm the president of the University of the Middle East Project. It's a university project based in Massachusetts, and we bring high school teachers from all over the Middle East and North Africa, mainly to train the trainers on new skills and ways of teaching and learning, focusing on civic education and better teaching methods, of course, technology. And my other project is also, I'm a board member of a company based in Lebanon called Development Services, where we target mainly assessment and testing from K through 12 in the Arab world. And what we do is really, it's country specific, where we take the curriculum of each country and we do assessment based on skills and knowledge. So these are my two hats. Your question is, how do we compare the region these days? First of all, I would like to maybe add a little bit to what my colleagues here talked about. How do you define the world education, and if we are there yet today? I think the most important thing is to prepare the students not only to the market, but also to prepare them, to give them the necessary skills to enter the colleges and universities, and we are not there yet. If we look at statistics in the Arab world, we have lots of difficulties, including in UAE, where students struggle a lot to enter the university level. So in order to be competitive, or in order to arrive to the standards, we have to improve a lot our education system in order for the preparedness of the skills. How do we compare internationally? I think we still have a long shot and a long way to go. Again, the region is, the resources are different. You cannot compare Yemen to UAE, to Jordan, to Palestine, to other places, and it's certainly country specific. But again, as my colleague here, as I said, the education system here, the countries have been very prolific in putting the strategies. You have the Abu Dhabi 2030 strategy that's put in place that is aiming in improving the education system. You have similar initiative in Saudi Arabia, where the government have put recently about $30 billion just to invest in education. Jordan is a great example where it's leading the educational needs in the Middle East and becoming one of the top countries on the lead. So again, there is lots of lots of work to be done, but we are on the way. There are baby steps, but we are getting there.
Very good, thank you. I would like to invite any of you on the floor to join in at any point. If you can raise your hand to catch my attention, I'll try and spot you and get you involved. Estelle, perhaps you could pick up on the point there. Dr. Hala is talking about increasing utilization of IT in the classroom. Now, key to that is the role of the teacher. How well equipped are the actual teaching workforce in the region to transfer this knowledge across?
Well, hello, my name's Estelle Burton, and I've been an educator, a classroom teacher for many years, as well as a senior manager. And I work for CFBT, which is the Centre of British Teachers, which is a charity based here, working as an operator on the reform project here for Abu Dhabi Education Council. In terms of teachers being prepared for the classroom, there's still a long way to go. Often teachers for IT, and I'm going to talk, I'm trying to talk globally about all teachers, but IT teachers often come very, very well qualified. But that knowledge can't always be put to good use in the classroom. What I see a need for within education here is that there's ongoing professional development, continuous professional development. IT moves at a very, very fast rate. You can't copy systems that are in the West, because you'll always be on a time lag. You need to have your own debate, your own conversation, and that the continual professional development is essential for teachers on an ongoing basis, because you can't just simply learn something at university or teacher training college and then hope that that is going to steer you through your whole teaching career. Throughout my own teaching career, I can think that every year is completely different. The needs of the student, and I always put the student at the centre, the learner is at the centre. You need to think of their needs very critically. And often in education, we are not really putting their needs of that end user. We're not really thinking about what their needs are. We have quasi-business systems that are sort of fed down into the education system rather than educational content, educational systems that are fit for that end user. One of the things that I would love to see, and is beginning to develop now, are creative, innovative, critical thinkers within our secondary schools. Because skills, knowledge, great, but how do you put that to good use? How do you use that to create new and innovative products? Because otherwise, you'll always be you'll be a consumer, not an innovator. And that's what I would like to see here, is that you are innovating, you are creating your own businesses and new products and new industries here, not taking from what already sits there. I always say there's no real design label, no quick fix to education. It's a long, ongoing process. And I think we need a flexible and diverse access to education as well. I agree here, we need to embrace the family. Well, how do we do that? It's great to say these things, but how do we actually do that? So where are these learning centres going to be? Well, they're going to be our schools. They have to be our schools. And the community has got to be part of that school. And if we collaborate and work together, I feel that we can really move forward. In terms of infrastructure within schools, there's movements in the right direction to actually creating good, robust systems. Still a long way to go because we don't have the service industry on the outside to support that at the moment. But there is a digital divide that actually exists because of the cost of infrastructure. And I'd like to see perhaps people like Microsoft providing more things like software as a service, using the cloud technology, which is well used already. It's not a new thing. Should we be using that to actually reduce the cost to schools in this new technology?
Sorry, Estelle, can I just, are you asking for companies such as Microsoft to provide on a free basis, or in what capacity, in what way will Microsoft do this?
Well, I think that at the moment we're sort of tied into things at quite a large cost. That's my own experience back in the UK. There are other ways around reducing costs now, and one of those is about having services on demand, or looking towards open source, or and also I think that people like Microsoft can support schools by supporting the initiative and looking at the creativity and the ideas that already exist here in education.
Perhaps as sorry, Dr. Hallett, yeah?
I mean, I understand your idea, and it's a great idea, but I want to go back to Ralph's comment earlier. He spoke about identity, he spoke about faith, he spoke about religion, and I think the solution has to come from the Middle East to the Middle East. Absolutely. I mean, I understand the effect of Microsoft, of HP, of all these companies, but I really think that there is also a partnership with the people here, people around this table who understand the culture, who understand the religion, who understand the whole component, but bringing outsiders to the table to improve the educational system without the deep knowledge is also a very risky business.
And that's why I said
perhaps I could cut in there because
yes.
in Jordan you have a lot of experience.
Actually, this is where I need to interject because I think you're both right, and I think it has to come from the country's vision itself. However, many of these private sector companies have their own programs to help these countries, and these companies are very flexible. For example, Microsoft, they have this huge program called Partners in Learning that to support all countries for creating innovative teachers, innovative schools, and innovative students. And the idea, there's a lot of flexibility in that program in the sense that you have to be, as a country, leading your own reform. You have to know what to leverage. And there isn't a single, I mean, most IT companies and many other companies have their own reform programs or have their own programs for training, professional development that could help the schools. But you're very right in the sense that you have to know what's out there and you have to tap into it and tailor it towards what you need mostly in your schools. And schools do need, in our part of the region, schools do need a lot of hand-holding. That's why, for example, organizations like the JEI, our organization, actually exists because we are the bridge between the government and the schools. We are the bridge between the private sector and the schools. And we actually do not just plug in technology in the schools and walk around and leave. It's here's the technology, here's how to use it, let's send you off to training. We spend time, in some cases we have some of our teams sitting in the school with the teachers, because we don't want teachers to be apprehensive from using technology. So if anything goes wrong, that person would go and fix it so that the teacher does not feel that there's a cut in the class until they're comfortable. And we have some amazing examples of teachers who use technology very comfortably in the school.
Azza, would you like to come back on any of these points?
Yes, I'd like to respond that Microsoft and I'm sure other IT companies are thinking along the same lines. Microsoft has a mandate actually to support teacher training, student training, institutional training, just to allow entities absorb and adopt technology at the right kind of pace based on the certain circumstances of the entity we are dealing with. And as Haif said, we have the well-known program of Partners in Learning, and it's specifically there and designed for this particular objective. And Partners in Learning is actually, as I see it, it's a supply that has created its own demand. It's a service to education. And when we approach education entities and run them through the Partners in Learning program, again, it opens new frontiers as to what kind of teacher training in ICT is relevant to this particular institution. How do you allow your teachers to absorb ICT in education at their own pace? Actually, students are quite advanced when it comes to ICT in education. So on this front, we are tackling it through another end, which is unleashing the innovative capabilities of students when it comes to ICT in general. And again, institutions is perhaps the least difficult aspect of Partners in Learning program, because you deal here with sheer technology, sheer technological competences that are sort of an off-the-shelf kind of services. However, when it comes to teachers training, Microsoft is very committed to this aspect of
Thank you very much. We're running out of time now, so I'll just end with where we started, end with Ralph. Sorry, was there a hand up in the audience? Yes, if you could say your name and where you're from. One moment, there's a microphone coming, please.
Hi, my name is Saqib Safta. I'm from the International Community School in Jordan. I've got two questions. I know time is short, but anyone...
And who are the questions for?
One is for Professor Ralph. I'm just more interested in the GEMS initiative in the family and school engagement, and I'm particularly interested in what kind of strategies will be used to overcome the cultural differences between expat communities and schools and teachers and local parents. And often there's a kind of tension between the values that different people have. And my second question is to Haif, and it's about how private schools and the private sector can be more involved in your initiative, in the Jordan Education Initiative, and what kind of roles they can play.
Okay, thank you. Ralph, if you could take the first question about the role of the family.
We've got quite a few aspects of our program in GEMS working with parents, but just take one example for the sake of brevity. We might talk afterwards. You can actually go online and see some of this at a site called www.learnaspireb.com. But one very simple thing, these are always simple things that we can do together. We've asked our schools to move away from always running their parents' evenings as parents coming in and talking to individual teachers about how their children are doing. The conventional model, we sort of tot up which parents come and which ones don't, and we wring our hands and worry about the ones that don't. We've just tried to flip it round, and we run now evenings for parents where we'll bring in some expert speakers, maybe only talk for about 15, 20 minutes about child development and about what's important in the way of skills that children need by the age of 10, or why or how we develop resilience in children. So we're taking our professional knowledge and we're sharing it with the parents. And almost always what happens, no matter what community, is when we stop, people start to stand up in the audience and say, you know, I want to talk about Hanif, I want to talk about Natasha. And they'll say, she's doing this, she's doing too much homework, or I can't get my boy to... And just out of that dialogue, and we share how we see those problems and the ways we would advise parents to tackle it, we've turned the conversation into something which everybody can take part in, and we start to co-create new solutions. I think that's the kind of program of parental engagement, the kind of things that we can do much more effectively. If you get parents involved, you're tripling the amount of time for education in a child's first 18 years.
And the second question to Haif about the role of the private sector in the Jordan Education Initiative.
Perhaps what Saqib is actually pointing out to in Jordan is that there is quite a strong number of private sector schools who are well resourced and have some excellent teachers and excellent leadership, and they are certainly a resource not to be missed out on. We do not have yet regular programs of engagement for private schools yet, although we do have some. Of course, we're affiliated with our sister organization, which is IAA, Her Majesty's School is a sister organization, and we do a lot of work with the international, with Amman Baccalaureate School. The idea is there's a lot of learning lessons that can be done. We talked about principals shadowing programs, we talked about teachers shadowing programs, and of course there could be a lot of opportunities that, if you like, we can take offline to speak about potential engagements.
Great, fantastic, thank you very much. I'm going to wrap the session up for the moment, unless we perhaps have time for one more question if there is any burning issue that someone would like to raise. Okay, I'm going to wrap the session up there. I would like you all to thank our panel. That's Professor Ralph Tabora of GEMS Education, Haif Banayan, Chief Executive of Jordan Education Initiative, Dr. Hala Tawil, President of the University of the Middle East Project, Azza El-Shinawi, who is the Education Lead at Microsoft Gulf, and Estelle Burton, who is Principal Advisor at the UK's Confederation for British Teachers. Please thank our panelists. Thank you very much. And just to let you know, Ralph's presentation will be available on the Bett website if any of you want to follow up on that. Thank you very much, everybody.